this year, it's been a really great year for all kinds of art. But there was one company that I felt like did a tremendous amount and was recognized quite a bit by our countdown this year, and so we're awarding them our indie publisher of the year, and that is the Above the Rain Collective. It is Juliet Rose's publication. We didn't even mention her anthology Final Passenger that came out this year as well, but Juliet put out 3 books, and 2 of which obviously made our lists very prominently and talked about quite a bit here. And so she deserves a lot of credit for the work she's put in this year. And so, Juliet, thank you so much. You are our indie publisher of 2024. So, congratulations.
Hooray! Congratulations, Juliet.
For just kind of give us a context of the name and where it comes from, the origin of it a little bit for us, and why you decided to call it Above the Rain Collective.
Yeah. So it kind of came from 2 things. One, I've talked about it in previous interviews. I had a really hard life. I definitely have struggled most of my life. I was, grew up in an abused household. I was on my own at 16, had to drop out of school and back and got my GED. Then went to college. I was always kind of struggling to get past this point. Then I had a daughter that was born and then diagnosed with cancer, and I lost her. And, from that, eventually I ended up divorced. And, it kind of just, it was always, there was never this easy path. It was always really hard. So I always felt like I was going through storms. Above the Rain kind of came out of that. The other second part of that was that I really got burned by some publishers early on with contracts, and just, I kind of got held up. And that's really what brought me to want to create Above the Rain as a collective, was that experience with publishers. There's a lot of pop-up publishers that, and they have been around a long time, but they just don't know what they're doing. They're really not putting the author first. They're really putting themselves first and trying to make a profit off the back of, already not paid authors. We're just not making money out here, people. It's just not a thing. And so the collective part came because I really originally was laying in bed one night and thinking about what I wanted to do. I was already publishing myself at that point. And I was really I want to work with other authors, but I don't want the traditional, kind of buy into the situation where, they either submit something and then get an advance and then they're kind of hands off. I really wanted to do more of an author co-op, something where we could really use our skills together through bartering, through, those type of things. And so that's really kind of when the collective part came together. And I've been doing that really slowly, because the other thing is I'm a researcher. And so I kept seeing these publishers that would pop up and do all this stuff and then fold. And a lot of times in folding, they really screwed over their authors. Authors were struggling to get back rights. They were never getting paid. I mean, I've been through it. That literally happened to me. And so I really wanted to, so I want to have something where the author was actually part of the process, and not a vanity press where they pay a bunch of money and then somebody does everything and then hands them a book, but rather let's work together. And so the 2 things that I've done so far are the anthology. We had the Final Passenger last year, and then Devour the Rich. And first things, authors always just get paid. That is absolutely first thing I do. I don't care about anything else. That has to happen. A cover artist, whoever, they get paid. I don't make money off that, and I'll say that as well. I still haven't even broken even on Final Passenger. I'm still in the hole from that. But again, this is what I wanted to do. Devour the Rich is the same. I'm really just putting my own money into it at this point to build this. And then the second thing I'm doing is a mentor program, right? I find somebody that's maybe like a new author out there and really just work on a mentorship with them. So they come in under Above the Rain. They don't pay anything. Again, I'm not a vanity press. I'm trying to do this as a co-op. And we work together to really get their book out there, with services. And I don't make money off that either. Even in the current situation, that mentor is going to own everything once we're done, and they'll actually own the rights. They'll make their money. I don't even see it. It's really, that's something I'm doing out of like a passion project.
That's awesome. I love all of that. Are the anthologies something you're going to quarterly do, once a year kind of idea?
Yeah, so I'd like to do 2 a year. But again, because I'm paying this out of pocket for the most part, I do the crowdfunding, but my crowdfunding isn't terribly successful. We'll just say that. Like I make maybe a little bit, enough to kind of take a little bit of the dent. But honestly, I've been paying out of pocket. So it really will just depend on if I financially can swing to do another anthology. Because again, I absolutely insist on paying the authors and the artists involved. It's just something I believe in. It's as an author, and we've been on that side too. It's like, it means so much more when someone's even willing to shoot you $20 for something that you've done. Yeah. You say, okay, they're not only wanting it, they're willing to pay for it. And so like, to me, even I may not have much, I want them to know how much I appreciate them allowing me to publish their work. And that's, again, my whole philosophy with this is lifting the author, not lifting the publisher. And from little things that I do, like when I edit and I do these anthologies, I don't put edited by on the cover. I put the author's names on the cover because they're the ones that are doing the work, They're the creatives. It wouldn't exist without them. So everything that I'm doing is trying to lift the authors, because there's so many people wanting money from authors. I mean, all day long, we're just bombarded with people that want us to pay for this and pay for that. And then they're scamming, and, it's always something.
Yeah.
So much money gets poured into trying to do this. And I just don't want to be another person doing that.
So as far as like the mentorships go and the anthologies go, twofold, are you allowing yourself, because you do a lot of events, you do a lot of signings, and I know that you appear in the anthology, so it's probably a lot easier proposition for that. But for like the mentor books that you're doing, is there a point where you're going to be putting some of that on your table? Is your table going to be more representative of Juliet, or is it going to be more representative of Above the Rain eventually?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, ultimately I'm an author first. That's what I've always wanted to be. So like, I never want to get to the point where I don't have time for that. And it definitely this year became that. Like, I was like, okay, I have to learn to balance my ability to write, because
you put out 2 books.
I did. Yeah. Well, I did. And it really was a lot of work for me to squeeze in that time for that. But, it is important for me to do that. Now, as a publisher, that is part of my end goal as well, as to be a publisher. But again, I'm not trying to be a publisher to get rich off that. I'm trying to be a publisher so that we're creating, I guess, safe zones for authors where they can really get better at their craft, where they can feel appreciated. So it's a tough one because, like, yes, in order for a business to survive, it needs money. And my philosophy doesn't necessarily bring in money, especially under the mentorship. And I said, the anthologies bring in a little, but they're really, like I said, I'm still not even on something I put almost a year ago. So that still is somewhat of a passion project. But my end goal is to eventually have at least be self-sustaining, like where it does pay for itself, so that I can continue to do that, because I really think we need more of this out there than people that are like, there's a lot of great publishers, but there's just a lot of publishers that are burning authors left and right. And I got burned not by 1, but by 4. So like, I was like, what are things I don't ever want to do? And that's really when I came.
Is Above the Rain going to follow the philosophy that you've kind of taken with your own books, in that there's an underlying message, there's something in it that has redeemable value to what we're reading? Is that important to you for the authors you're going to represent too, or is there? I guess what I'm asking is, are you looking for a specific story to help move along, or is it more about the author themselves?
Yeah, I think it's more about the author, because the one thing we have to be really careful about when we step into these roles of publisher or editor is not to rob the voice of the author. And so often it is, like, they're taken away. And so for me, my goal is less about what type of story it is And I mean, I tend, the stuff I publish just tends to fall into more like the dark fiction realm anyway, even the authors that are drawn to it. So, I mean, I have a Grim Reaper as my mascot. So, it's kind of says that. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, if somebody came to me with just a straight up romance. I don't know. I might work with them on more of like, guidance side of it, but I wouldn't publish it simply because I think that it wouldn't fit within that.
Yeah.
But again, ultimately what I'm looking for is authors that show a lot of potential, are willing to do the work, but are somehow being passed over.
I'm curious, your process in selecting. I'm sure you've now had the privilege of the slush pile aspect of this business. So kind of go through how you determine, to give somebody an idea of, to give people out there hope and a chance when you do put out calls for these anthologies. What do you feel like is the very first thing you will notice, or that you will feel? Is it the first 5 pages? Do you look for something specific that you're trying? Is it the message? What are you looking for when you start reading these slush piles and weeding them out probably fairly quickly?
Yeah, so my anthologies have been very, very on theme. Like they have a very specific theme to them. And so that's the first thing is, did the writer just grab something that they hadn't submit to me without thinking about the theme? Because when I'm doing an anthology, I not only want to have a really good collection of short stories, I want the overall short stories to come together in this like story, like they come together to tell this like story. Like, so like with Devour the Rich, that one's pretty gruesome. I have to say, like everybody really was good about staying on theme, but it's pretty dark. But like if somebody submitted something that they were like, well, it's horror, or oh, it's this, but it isn't really going to match the theme, then no, I wouldn't necessarily accept that into that, because again, the integrity of the anthology and the integrity of the other authors who have taken time to pick the right story or write the right story and submit it has to be respected. As far as the mentors go, I look for mentors. Usually it's people kind of like that I have seen in and around the writing community. Sometimes it is somebody like my first mentor was somebody who submitted a short story to Final Passenger. And she and I know each other on Facebook, and I could just really see where she was struggling a little bit with how she was going to branch out, like get over this, just it's submitting to anthologies and wanting to do more. And so that's when the idea really came to me, as I reached out to her and said, hey, this is a new idea I have, but it's something I feel is important and I would love to mentor you. And it also has to be somewhat, I would like right now for somebody in the region, just so we can meet up every now and then. Yeah. And she's about 2 hours away from me. So I said, this is something, we could meet, go over things. And again, I'm not getting anything out of that at this point. It doesn't mean in the future I won't readjust it. But right now it is really just me giving of my time and my experiences to help somebody else get to that point. What's most important to me when it comes to being indie is quality. And I feel like the more we help each other, the higher that quality raises. And my goal is to get it to raise where there's never ever question compared to traditional publishing. So people are like, yeah, but indie is this and traditional is this. I want someone to not know the difference, or to even say indie is that much better because they're putting more work into it. And that's been my goal.
Have you been surprised by what you've been submitted? Have some of these stories just shocked the hell out of you and gone, wow, I can't believe somebody thought of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially this most recent one. I say Devour the Rich. Final Passenger was a lot of fun. It was my first anthology, and so got some great stories in that, and they were definitely on theme of the thing. But I have to say with Devour the Rich, because I think there's a lot more passion behind this theme for a lot of people. I'm pretty blown away about these stories. There's times I'm like going through and doing edits, and I'm just like, thank you so much for letting me publish this story, because it's amazing, So yeah, there's some really great stuff out there.
So tell everybody a little bit about Devour the Rich, because it's a really good theme. I wish I had the time to sit down and write something, because I had something percolating. It just never came to fruition for myself. But c'est la vie. But tell everybody a little bit about this concept and what it's about.
Yeah, so it kind of came from personal experience. Last year I had put 7 years into this company, built teams for them. I literally kind of given my blood, sweat, and tears. And at the end of the year, I was told, hey, we're downsizing, we're laying you off. And that was it. Like, it was just like nothing else, And from there, then I started that same company started laying more and more people off. And then I started seeing it across the board, not just that company, but, I really kind of keep an eye on like the markets. And I saw that a lot of people are getting laid off, no notice, et cetera. And meanwhile, those same companies and just across the board are getting record, profits. And I was like, has nothing to do with the company struggling anymore. Like it used to be in the day you might get laid off because they were struggling. Now it's about the shareholders wanting to make as much money, and they don't care if they sink it because they'll just go and invest into another company with the profits that they've made. And so I could go on that for like hours. But so that's kind of where it came out. I said, I know a lot of people out here are frustrated with our current environment. And so I really wanted to have an anthology that, went from anything from dealing with bad bosses to dealing with, the entitlement of the rich and thinking that they deserve more rights and things than we have. And so I really left it at that, just Devour the Rich. And God, I think we have 17 authors that just submitted. I'm not kidding. These are like, I squirmed doing some of this because there is some like really, even the story I wrote, I made myself squirm because I was like, and I wrote that like, I know you said you didn't have time. I literally wrote that like last week. I was like, I better get a story in there, but they really, I think that's what I loved about this one was you could see that people were really drawing on their own personal experiences to create these stories.
Yeah, it's one of those topics where, there's somebody out there that can relate to it pretty easily, I think. Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about Final Passenger.
Yeah, so Final Passenger actually came, and this is, originally I was a little, I don't want to say lost in where I wanted to go with Above the Rain. I knew I wanted to help other authors, and I knew I wanted to do this kind of collective idea, but I was trying to figure out what my next step would be. Like I had published, my own books, and I had published another author's books. And then I was like, what is my next step to kind of branch out? Mm-hmm. And my daughter and I were driving with it, and I don't know how the topic came up, but she was talking about taxi cab drivers in Japan that would pick up these passengers, and then they would get to their destination and there would be nobody in the car. I'm like, I love that idea. Like it's good and spooky and, enough realistic. So I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna do an anthology with that. You just have to have a passenger and a travel theme. So whatever it is. So we have anything from trains to buses to submarines to like everything, like every kind of transportation. And I wanted it to be speculative horror. So I wanted people to really kind of go into like a little bit farther than just that story, like come up with a passenger, come up with a transportation and just go wild with it. And we got some great stories in that one too. I mean, everybody met the mark with that as well. And, that one was tough because it was my first one. And I don't think people really knew me yet, like in the sense of being a publisher. And so I got some, but I actually ended up reaching out to a few authors that I knew because I felt like I just wanted to put a little more into it and said, hey, would you consider writing a story for this? And it's paid. And, I think you'd be great. And especially female. I wanted more female horror authors. And I got almost totally male submissions initially. And so I went in, I know a lot of female horror authors, and I was like, I just went and said, hey, would you consider writing a story for this? And they did. And so I had a really good balance. And I do try to keep that balance of male and female in the books. Because I think that, especially when you're writing speculative horror or sci-fi, it still tends to be a little bit male dominated. And I want to show that women have some really good twisted stories to put out there.
For you and your own writing right now, how are you feeling? Do you feel like you're hitting a stride? Is there a sense that you're going in the right direction for yourself? Or do you feel like you still have a lot of work to do to get to where you want to be?
I think as an author, if you don't always feel like you have a lot of work to get to where you need to be, you're probably missing the mark a little bit. I'm really self-critical. I mean, I really tear myself up about stuff. And as you know, I'm a multi-genre author, so I do vacillate between different genres, although all of them tend to have that same dark fiction aspect. So even if it's a contemporary suspense, it's going to have something in there that's dark. It's just how I write things. Like I said, I don't think I've never not killed somebody off in a book. It's just how I write. And that could be contemporary romance and I'm still going to kill somebody off. So I really don't write contemporary romance, but if I did, I'd still kill somebody off, So I think that that's a bit of a struggle because there is a mindset. And then again, something I don't want to get trapped into, that you have to be really niche or really genre to be successful. And I feel like, again, that's something I'm taking a stand against because I hear people say, oh, well, I did write this, but it didn't make money. So I only switched to this. But they're really not happy with that. They're doing it for the market, not for themselves. And as writers, we have to write as much for ourselves, our life, our soul, as we are to try to market it out there. And so I'm, in a way, I definitely took a stand against a few things, which was I wasn't going to stick to one genre. I was going to write whatever story came in my head in my voice, and my voice has to be enough for my readers to appreciate. The other side of it is I refused, because I knew I'd be writing in dark areas. So like writing horror, writing, horror elements into sci-fi and things like that, was I didn't use initials. I wanted to use my name, and it's very feminine, and I know it is, and I don't care. Like, because people say, well, if you changed it and did this, I'm like, well, then they aren't my readers, because ultimately I don't want to have to bend and break to please someone to be a writer. I want to find the people that will appreciate my style and my voice for who I am.
Talking to folks who author and edit, there is a disconnection between the two where you're able to kind of compartmentalize it and change your brain's mindset so that you're in an editing mode versus an authoring mode. And I mean, you do that for not only the stories that you write, but you also do that for the anthologies that you are doing. But I'm curious if during the anthology process and you're reading these and you're editing them, are you picking up little things for yourself as an author to utilize down the road? Are you feeling like you're becoming a better author for going through these processes?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because when we start writing, we're kind of writing from this one like idea in our head. And I mean like idea and story idea, but an idea in how to be a writer. And that could come from maybe being in school and we were taught certain things. And I definitely had that where like I was in school at a certain time where certain things were taught that have now changed. You didn't start a sentence with but. Well, sometimes that sentence needs to be started with but. So ultimately you have to adapt and change, and getting to experience other writers' work and seeing things I really appreciate, things that make me laugh, things that make me go, aha, that was a good way to do that, definitely makes me a better writer, because then it breaks down those barriers of what I believed for so long to be the only way to write. And I can say it to anybody. There is a million ways to write, and none of them are wrong. Don't buy into the rules. A lot of these rules were put out at a time when only white, fairly well-off men were being allowed to be writers. And so a lot of these rules came kind of from this like rigidness of control. And that doesn't make a good story. I mean, I spent a year reading the classics, and I was like, most of these wouldn't even get published now, because they're just not interesting, right? So like, being able to say, okay, what is the most important thing? And for me, and then this because you've read my stories, is character. Like the characters first and foremost. And that's also what I tend to gravitate to when I'm looking at stories for the anthology, or I'm looking to mentor somebody. Is this somebody that knows how to build a really good character and keep me interested in what's happening to them? Because again, no matter how good the story is, if I don't care about that character, I don't care what happens.
How connected to them are you? Are you guys kind of connected in do you give a little bit of yourself to them, or do they give a lot more of them to you?
You talking about the characters or other authors?
Characters.
I mean, I'm just their puppet. Ultimately, they're pulling the strings on. I'm writing it down, because and that's, I think, how it should be. Because I think when you try to create a character and what you want it to be, and you try to manipulate it, you get a flatness, because it doesn't have its own voice, that character. Yeah. So I have an idea when I sit down of who this character is going to be, but I listen, because I know that will make the best stories if I listen to that character. And if it changes gears completely to what I thought, then that's the way it was supposed to be.
How do you look at critiques and reviews and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think for any writer, we can say it doesn't matter to us, but of course it does, because I mean, we are literally taking something from inside our head and inside our soul and putting it onto paper and putting it out there. So there's always a level of vulnerability when it comes to getting critique or getting reviewed. We would all love 5-star reviews, but then again, I also know that those aren't always true. Like, I don't want someone to give me a 5-star review because they're my friend. Right. I want someone doing it because it's good writing. On the flip side, I think there does still exist to a level of like this kind of jealousy within the atmosphere. And some of that is driven by this need to market and things like that. So I think that when you're looking at critique, if it's a one-off critique, you have to remember it's one-off, right? Mm-hmm. One person's opinion isn't always the truth. Now, but if you hear the same critiques over and over again, then that's something you have to pay attention to and say, okay, do I need to adjust this? Do I lean too much on exposition? Do I, whatever it is, is this something I'm doing? However, that being said, and I say this every time I do my show, is, there's really the point of not allowing someone to steal your voice. And sometimes those people also were raised with those rigid rules, or they have a particular thing that they like. If you are happy doing what you're doing, keep doing it. Mm-hmm. If you're not, like, sometimes you feel that way, you're like, I feel like I'm missing something, then that's time to dig in, talk to others, look for critique. Back in the day, we used to have critique groups. We would take our stuff before it was published and send it, and we'd get that critique back. And I feel like now that's not, everybody's busy. I mean, everybody works, everybody's trying to get by. So I think we don't have as much free time for that. But I think that, it's a real balancing act. You have to be willing to take critique and look at it in a very critical eye. But you can't let it change your voice.
So I asked that question for the purpose of the next question, which is so you have these anthologies. Is it easier to look at critiques because you're not as attached? I mean, obviously you have a story in these anthologies, but it is other authors that are mostly representing this work. Or do you feel like there's a little bit more of a motherly aspect to, like, you're more protective of your other authors because from what you read of critiques? How have you handled that aspect of it?
Okay, so I've been in anthologies where I wasn't the publisher, and I've been in anthologies where I was the publisher, and I can say it's different. Like in one of the first anthologies I was in, a lot of the stories got pretty bashed. Luckily, mine wasn't one of them. I actually was often called out as the one good story in there. In that case, I didn't feel protected because I didn't select those stories, and I didn't, I wasn't invested in that way. Yeah. But as a publisher, I'm definitely more, because I'm picking those and I'm working with these authors, and I also take the responsibility to make sure if say something's getting slammed in there, did I do my job to make sure I worked with them to make the story the best it could be? So I think in that aspect, yes, I'm more protective, but like in one where I'm just in the story, I'm not as protective.
What's the game plan for this year? I mean, obviously we have Devour the Rich. What's the plan after that for you and Above the Rain?
Yeah, so I mean, I have my own book done, which is the prequel to Do Over and We Don't Matter. And again, never planned on doing this. Do Over was going to be a standalone book. And then after I wrote Do Over, one of the minor characters, just let me know he wasn't done. That became We Don't Matter. After writing We Don't Matter, and I was driving home one day and I was thinking about, it was interesting, I was thinking about We Don't Matter. And these books, for people who don't know, get really into addiction and how addiction impacts those around them, where addiction really comes from, the trauma of it. One of my favorite movies and books is Beautiful Boy. Yeah. And I was driving home and I was thinking about that. And I thought, this character that kind of starts the addiction story, he only gets about halfway through Do Over, and then I won't say anything because it tells me the rest of the stories. But like, I realized he had so much more of a story to tell, how this all began. So like, that's where Done became this prequel, is Casey's story and how Casey came to be an addict, and what happened leading up to Do Over and then We Don't Matter. I have another author I'm publishing sometime in late spring, and then my mentor, she and I are working. We're hoping to get something out for her in the fall. And then if I have time, then I will write something. I have another story that I want to tell, but I will see where my time is.
And then possibly a second anthology for the year as well.
If and like I said, I want to see how Devour the Rich goes, and if it does well, and if we're doing decently, then I would like to do one, in the winter, like I did. Like I want to do one every 6 months. So looking at probably like, October.